It's no longer news that Sunak is totally dishonest when using statistics, but here he is again. Major deception, major dishonesty. In the debate between Prime Minister Sunak and Leader of the Opposition Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister highlighted the tax implications of all of Labour's proposed policies. This is what Sunak said. Independent Treasury officials have costed Labour's policies and they amount to a £2,000 tax rise for every working family. This statement is really problematic in a number of ways, yet he kept repeating it. And then a few days later, at the next election debate, Penny Mordaunt repeated it again, despite all the facts of what had come out about it and how it was dishonest, how it could even be called a lie. So this is the report that sets out the £2,000 calculation. And the first thing we can observe is that the document doesn't really look like it's been produced by the Conservative Party. It doesn't say Conservatives on the document, nor is it blue, the regular colour of the party. It's red, which is the colour of the Labour Party. It doesn't actually say who it's produced by, except for a tiny footnote on the very last page, where it is identified as a Conservative Party publication. So I think right from the start, it's intended that this document is designed to look like something other than a straightforward piece of party political literature. So the document lists 16 policies that have been announced by Labour. It aggregates the cost of these policies over a 4-year period. So let's deal with the point that Labour's policies have been costed by independent Treasury officials. It is true that most, but not all, of the figures have been calculated by the Treasury. However, to say that this is an independent analysis is just an outright lie. The civil service is under direct political control. It's not like the Bank of England or the Office for Budget Responsibility, which do have independence. But okay, a minister can ask civil servants to do some impartial calculations. There's nothing unusual about that. However, one really important point here is that the civil servants were given assumptions by so-called special advisors. These advisors are working in the civil service, but they are political appointees and not impartial civil servants. So I found the calculations done by the Treasury on the government website, and I picked 3 random policies from the list of 16. In all these 3 cases, assumptions were given to the civil servants doing the calculations by the politically appointed special advisors. Perhaps all of the assumptions provided by special advisors were reasonable, but to say that independent Treasury officials have costed Labour's policies is just an outright lie. This resulted in a clarification from the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, the most senior civil servant, who said that civil servants were not involved in the production of the document Labour's tax rises or in the calculation of the figure used. Further, he said that costings derived from other sources or produced by other organisations should not be presented as having been produced by the civil service. So the civil service has had to clarify that it did not produce the £2,000 figure. In other words, it's confirmed that Sunak's claims are misleading. But it gets a lot worse than this. Let's look how the 2,000 figure is actually calculated. The Conservatives added up the spending commitments of 16 policies. They subtracted the additional revenue sources that Labour has announced, for example, VAT on private schools, taxing non-doms, etc. This then gave the shortfall for each of the next 4 years. They claim that the total shows a shortfall of £38.5 billion. This is divided by 18.4 million households that have at least one person paying tax, and that comes out at about £2,000 per household. What they're not pointing out when they quote the figure is that this £2,000 is for 4 years, so it's actually £500 per year. It's also dishonest because it's not only households that pay tax, Businesses also pay taxes, so the figure is inflated in this way too. And why focus on households rather than the number of taxpayers? They've just made the figure as high as possible. They've continued to use this £2,000 figure, even though it's very misleading. Unfortunately, we've reached a stage in politics where our politicians believe that if you say something enough times, even though it's clearly not true, it will still have an impact. It's called gaslighting. The Office for Statistics Regulation has wrapped the government's knuckles on this. They said, without reading the full document, someone hearing the claim would have no way of knowing that this is an estimate summed together over 4 years. We warned against this practice a few days ago, following its use in presenting prospective increases in defence spending. They're being very polite and measured, but their message is clear. We've already told you before, and we're telling you again, do not mislead people by inflating figures. This is major dishonesty. Even certain elements of the right-wing press have more integrity than the Conservative Party. The Spectator has published some really damning articles on the whole affair. They have tricked Treasury officials by asking them to cost certain policies without telling them that the Prime Minister intended to quote them in order to try to undermine Labour's fiscal policy in an election debate. In another article, the magazine pointed out that applying a similar methodology to the published plans of the Conservative government would lift taxes by £3,000 per household. This is the right-wing press criticising the dishonesty of this figure. Interestingly, when we look at the list of new policies, for example, 2 million more NHS appointments, a doubling of NHS scanners, 700,000 extra dentist appointments, maybe £500 per year per tax-paying household isn't a bad deal, £42 a month. What a shame that Labour doesn't turn this round and make a positive out of it. Sadly, this isn't going to happen. Instead, given the Labour Party's commitment to the government's ridiculous fiscal rules, meaning that they will have to make cuts to services based on existing commitments, we're just guaranteed more years of austerity. I wish we did have a Labour Party that was going to increase taxes on the rich to improve public services. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking or subscribing. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.